Chapter 4.3, Part 3. My computer kind of cut out. Sorry about that. So we're still at Lineage and Ancestors on page 597 with the beast poles. And again, we're looking at these sort of upside down in terms of the way the tree would grow. These are the roots. This bottom part is the canoe. If you can kind of see it, it looks very boat-like right there. And that would carry this person to the afterlife. And these would potentially be ancestors that the person's connected to. I think I might be skipping over. I'm not sure where I left off. But the idea that this imagery is all carved with the physicality, the figures are very strong and virile, and their ability to hunt. There's also these horns used in head hunting. Now, like I said, this is a remote culture, not exposed to outsiders or judgment or missionaries and that kind of thing. Their practices were quite brutal. I would even say probably even now comparatively to most cultures because the survival there was very difficult. So they have different rituals not to do with this part of what we're looking at with headhunting, but they have some pretty intense rites of passage that they have to go through. And in this case, for one of the ways that you would prove your manhood would be headhunting. So you would go and kill someone, and then you'd bring the head, you'd remove the head, and you'd sort of process it and preserve it so that other people could see that you had killed someone, that you had had your first kill. Not very many cultures in the world celebrate the killing of another person, but this was one. One other thing to remember is that the trees are where the spirits dwell. So also that's important to note in terms of the ritual aspect of these pieces. But they were once made with this headhunting. They were connected. These poles were made to do with headhunting and warfare, and now they serve as a ritual function for male, and I'm reading from page 597 here, initiation and memorial feasts. Okay, so it's really important the connection between the carving of wood, because they feel their ancestors came from the trees, and then they go back to the trees and let these, and this is palm, by the way. I don't know if I made that really clear. It's a very fibrous sort of a wood, and then it goes back in the forest and rots to sort of fertilize the next generation. Okay, a little more detail in the book. Get into that before you start your discussion. Oh yeah, and there's some representations on there that show the ancestors themselves. Next artwork we're going to look at from the Yombe near Congo, the Femba piece. She's a kneeling female figure. This is kind of guesswork in this case. We don't know a lot about this particular piece, but this is important between the past and present in terms of reverence for ancestors. This is a maternity sculpture, and we don't think it's a representation of a woman doing daily tasks, going and gathering water with a small child, because there are some other parts that the artist gives us some significance beyond that. Usually, just a depiction of a woman with a child would be a woman nursing. So we think that the bowl and the child, this bowl that she's holding here and the child here, might be gifts to the gods, and that's just showing what she's prepared to give up. And it also conveys strength and beauty and dignity. So the bowl and child might be gifts from the god, or sacrifices to the gods to show what the sacrifices the woman is willing to make. I know we feel a bit heart struck by a culture that would give up their children as a sacrifice, but there are many cultures in which human sacrifice was quite normal and regulated. And then also, as we looked at with the New Guinean culture, that murdering another human was celebrated. Okay, totally different tone. This is Jillian Mayer, and this is I Am Your Grandma. So she's a young person, in her 20s, and she is thinking toward the future, and this is to do with genealogy. She's speaking to her not yet born grandchild. She doesn't have a kid at this point. Maybe by now, because this is 2011, she may have a child by now. But she does kind of a rap song, and then she uses a lot of imagery that is current, Lady Gaga and Picasso and different things, movies or different characters that might be familiar. And she does all these different costumes, but she makes up a song, and it's in the book. It's quite cute. But it's funny and unnerving, and it's a message to her future unborn grandchild. And this was on YouTube. It got 3.8 million hits. I don't know if this is saying that by 2011, but that's quite a lot. 1 minute, 3 seconds, very short, but it really plays with popular culture, and it's sort of thinking of ways to um, connect in with the real world and people we never meet, like long dead relatives. There's things like an ailing grandparent might write a letter to a child that hasn't been born yet. The mother's pregnant, and or this person's daughter or is pregnant, and they write a letter to that child, that grandchild they'll never meet. But this is quite beyond that. So kind of entertaining. You can look it up on YouTube. 13 costumes, catchy tune. It went viral. So mortality and immortality is the next and last segment we're going to get into in this chapter. And I'm hopefully going to be a little quicker. So artists have recorded birth and death for a long time, millennia, which means millions. Sorry. I just did that. Thousands of years. When we call millennials, that means like the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century, like year 2000, marking the next millennia. If that makes sense. Okay, so we are looking at a sarcophagus lid here from a temple in Mexico. So this is really interesting. It's a Maya ruler, Lord Pakal, and he's laying back here. Can you kind of see him in the low relief? This is a flat relief, a low relief where it's carved down into, and there's very light carving, but you can really get a lot of detail here. So there's sort of a tree of life coming up out of our reclining Pakal, and he's trying to show the importance of it's also a little bit with the ancestry, in the sense that life is growing out of him and the future generations is going to bear fruit. So it's an intersection of the earthly realm and the underworld, because beneath him is the setting sun, and that is associated with death. So this could be taken to be the setting sun, this imagery here, and then above him is the tree of life that's growing out of him. So its roots are in the underworld, its trunk is in the earthly world, and its branches are in the sky. And he is also carrying on the lineage of his ancestors to continue to provide sustenance and productivity for his people. So that's page 599. Cycle of life, intersection between earth and the underworld. That makes sense. Shiva, we're in India now, and this is a beautiful piece. Shiva Nataranja, Lord of the Dance. And this one's in Cleveland. There's a similar one at the Norton Simon in Pasadena. And you see that building in the Rose Parade, by the way. So anyway, this is a half female, half male entity. And Nataraja, he's always dancing. Shiva's always dancing to keep the cycle of birth and death active, and he is stepping on a dwarf that signifies ignorance. So, trying to keep the ignorance down and continue the cycle of birth and death. So, he's associated with both. So, chaos and destruction when the dance ceases, and then when the fire cleanses the physical world, it provides a release from samsara. Now, samsara is the continuing cycle of life and death. I'm going to stop there.